besties, welcome back to Maggie Stories. Grace is a Ghanaian woman working in IT and accidentally sat next to Saul's most feared man on a train, and she has the first class level banters. Now everything changes.
The thing about fear is that it has a smell. Grace Mensa had noticed this approximately 4 minutes ago, standing in the middle of a Seoul subway car that should have been packed. It was rush hour. It was a Friday. The city was alive and moving and loud. And yet there was a section of the car that looked like someone had drawn an invisible fence around it. 3 seats. Empty. On a Friday rush hour train in Seoul, where people had been known to stand for 40 minutes rather than put their bag down. 3 seats sat completely, aggressively, pointedly empty. Grace looked at the seats. She looked at the people who were not sitting in the seats, some of whom were actively holding the overhead rail with their whole body weight, knees slightly bent, one woman doing what appeared to be a quiet prayer with her eyes open. She looked back at the seats, and then she looked at the reason. He was sitting in the middle seat. Not at the window, not at the aisle, the middle seat, which on a 3-seater bench was the most passive-aggressive seating choice a person could make. With his legs slightly apart, one arm resting along the back of the empty seat beside him, looking at his phone like he was the only person on the train. Like the train, in fact, was a problem that had been built around him without his consent, and he was tolerating it. He was young. That was the first thing Grace registered. Young and unreasonably good-looking in the way that some people were, like the universe had been showing off the day it assembled his face. Sharp jaw, dark eyes, hair that was neither styled nor unstyled but somehow looked intentional. He wore all black, which in Seoul was not unusual, but on him it had a particular quality of statement. There was a ring on every other finger, and on his left wrist. Grace wasn't looking at his wrist yet. She was looking at the seats. She was tired. She had been at Kongdae Systems for 11 hours. 11 hours of a server migration. That should have taken 6, a junior technician who kept confidently doing things wrong, and a security patch that had decided today was the day it would stop cooperating with the universe. She had fixed all of it. She had eaten 1 triangle kimbap at 2 p.m. Her feet had opinions about the day that they were expressing loudly, and all she wanted, all she needed, was to sit down for 40 minutes while Seoul moved past the windows and her brain went completely, blissfully offline. She looked at the empty seat. She looked at the man. She walked over and sat down. Not next to him. She took the window seat, leaving the seat between them empty because she was tired, not reckless. But she sat down in the forbidden zone, dropped her tote bag on her lap, pulled out her earphones, and started untangling them with the focused energy of someone who had decided the rest of the world could handle itself. The entire section of the car had gone still. She didn't notice. She was working on a particularly stubborn knot in the left earbud cable. He noticed her not noticing. She could feel it, actually, not fear, because Grace Mensa had not been built with a fear setting that activated for strangers on trains, but awareness. The specific awareness of being looked at by someone who was not used to being ignored. It was a particular energy. She'd felt it before from difficult clients, from men at networking events who expected her to be impressed, from her aunt who made jollof rice and required specific praise. The energy of someone waiting for a reaction they weren't getting. She got the knot out. She put in her right earbud. He shifted slightly beside her. She peripherally registered it the way you register weather. She put in her left earbud. He made a sound. Not words, just a sound, the kind that was designed to prompt acknowledgement. Grace connected her phone to the earbud, selected her playlist, pressed play. The Seoul subway moved. The thing about Grace Mensa was that she had not come to Korea to be remarkable. She had come because a recruiter had emailed her on a Tuesday. She had been bored on a Tuesday, the offer had been genuinely excellent, and she had thought why not with the same energy other people reserved for ordering a different flavor of smoothie. She was 31. She had a degree in computer science, a side business doing freelance cybersecurity work for 3 companies who didn't know about each other, and an apartment in Mapogu with a window that looked over a street with a very good tteokbokki cart that opened at 6 p.m. She had been in Seoul for 2 years. She spoke Korean at what she called a functional level and what her coworkers called terrifying, because she had learned it the way she learned most things, obsessively, efficiently, and with no regard for the polite intermediate stage where you're supposed to be charmingly bad at it. She'd just woken up one day being decent at it and nobody had been warned. She loved Seoul. She loved the speed of it, the way the city took itself seriously, the food, the subway system, The fact that being a private person was culturally acceptable and nobody needed to know your business. Back home, Accra, Ghana, specifically the household of Perpetua and Kofi Mensah, being private was treated as a personality disorder. In Seoul, you could eat dinner alone and nobody would send a welfare check. She had friends. She wanted to be clear about this in the internal monologue she maintained for the purpose of being clear about things. She had friends. She had Bora from work, who texted her memes at inappropriate hours and had once helped her move a printer up 3 flights of stairs without complaining. She had Nadia from her building, a Congolese nurse who was doing her residency at Yonsei and who made mom chicken that made Grace briefly emotional. She had a Discord server with 12 people from a gaming community she joined in year 1, and they talked every day. She just also liked being alone. She liked her own company. She found herself genuinely funny, and she didn't see why that required external validation. Her playlist had just gotten to the second song when the man beside her, the one with the rings, the empty seats, the specific quality of being looked at, laughed. Not at something on his phone. The phone was in his pocket now. He laughed at her. It was a short laugh. Quiet. But it was the laugh of someone who had been watching something and found it funny, and Grace, who had been fully present in her music and mostly absent from the train, surfaced immediately because that laugh was directed. She pulled out one earbud. He was looking straight ahead now, jaw working slightly like he was trying to stop the expression on his face. "What?" Grace said. In Korean. He said nothing. "I know you're laughing at something." Still nothing. But the corner of his mouth was doing something suspicious. Grace narrowed her eyes at the side of his face. "If this is about the seat." "It's not about the seat," he said. His voice was low, unhurried, the kind of voice that expected to be heard without raising itself. He still wasn't looking at her. "Then what?" He paused, seemed to consider whether to answer. "Then, you were asleep." Grace's spine straightened with a velocity that should have made a sound. "I was not asleep. You were." A pause. "Your head went," he demonstrated, chin dropping toward his chest in a perfect, traitorously accurate impression of the exact thing Grace's head had definitely not done because she had definitely not been asleep. "That was a neck stretch," Grace said. 3 times. "I have a condition." He turned to look at her then, and Grace was annoyed to discover that his eyes were even more unreasonable up close. Dark, amused, holding the look of someone who had heard many things in his life but was ranking this statement quite highly in the category of creative responses. "A condition," he repeated. "An intermittent cervical recalibration condition," Grace said, with the full confidence of someone who had just invented those words. "Very common. My doctor knows about it." Something happened in his expression. It was very brief. But Grace, who spent her professional life reading systems for errors and anomalies, caught it. The specific twitch of someone who wanted very badly to laugh and was refusing to do so on principle. "Your doctor," he said carefully. "Yes. Knows about it. He has a file." He looked at her for another moment. Then he looked away. His jaw was tight. His shoulder nearest to her was doing something that she would describe, if pressed, as trembling. "You're trying very hard not to laugh," Grace observed. "I'm not laughing." "No, you're doing something worse. You're trying not to laugh, which means you think it's very funny, but you also think I'm serious, which means you're laughing at me in your head while making a face that says you're not, and honestly." She tilted her head. "That's more offensive than just laughing." He turned to look at her again. This time the expression was different, not amused in the way of someone who has the upper hand, but surprised. Like she had moved a piece he hadn't expected. "So you want me to laugh," he said. "I want you to commit to a position. A beat." He laughed. Properly this time, not loud, not performative, but real, which somehow felt louder than if it had been. Grace decided she had won that round. She put her earbud back in. She took it out again 40 seconds later, because her own brain would not let her leave it alone. "Why was everyone standing?" she asked. He looked at her. Something moved in his expression, careful now, like a door closing. "What?" "The whole train is packed. People are standing everywhere. 3 seats empty. You're in the middle one, which..." She gestured at the seat between them. "Why does this bench have a no-fly zone?" The careful thing was still there. Maybe they preferred to stand. "On a Friday, after 6 p.m. She looked at him. People here will sit on each other's laps before they'll stand if there's a seat. He said nothing. Grace Mensa was excellent at reading systems. She had once identified a network vulnerability that 2 senior engineers had missed because she had looked at what wasn't happening and asked why. What wasn't happening here was eye contact. What wasn't happening was an answer. What was happening was a very controlled stillness that was different from relaxation. She looked at him properly. The rings. The black. The way even sitting here in a normal subway seat in a normal car, he occupied space with the specific quality of someone who had never in their adult life had to fight for room. Something connected. She had heard about him. Not from anyone specifically, from the general ambient frequency of things people said in lowered voices in certain parts of Seoul. She worked in corporate IT. She moved through buildings. People talked. She had heard the name attached to descriptions, and she had filed it the way she filed most things that didn't directly affect her server uptime. Peripherally without urgency. And then, because Grace Mensa had been built without a self-preservation filter for situations that didn't immediately threaten her livelihood or her dinner, she looked at the bracelet on his left wrist, which she was only seeing now because his arm had shifted, and said, "Is that a gun on your bracelet?" The car, impossibly, got quieter. He looked down at the bracelet, then up at her. Yes. Grace looked at the charm for a moment. It was small, silver, detailed. Definitely a gun. Cool, she said, and put her earbud back in. He tapped her arm 4 minutes later. She took the earbud out again with the patience of someone who had made peace with the fact that this train ride was no longer going to be restful. "That's all you're going to say?" he said. "About the bracelet?" "Most people." He stopped. "Most people what?" He seemed to be recalculating. "Have more of a reaction. To a bracelet charm? To what it means." Grace looked at him. Then she looked around the car, at the people standing, holding rails, staring at phones, doing everything except sitting in the section. Then she looked back at him. "Okay," she said. "I've seen the movie. I understand the assignment." She tilted her head. "But I've also had a genuinely terrible day. My feet are making sounds they've never made before, and you're not pointing anything at me, so." She shrugged with her whole upper body. "I'm just trying to get home." He stared at her. She stared back. "You're not Korean," he said. "Ghanaian. Ghana. West Africa. You've heard of Africa?" "I've heard of Africa," he said, with a dry patience that surprised her. "Great. Then we've established geography." She put her earbud back in. Took it out immediately. "What's your name?" Another pause. Like every response required negotiation with himself. "Han Seo-jun." Grace nodded. "Grace Mensa." "Grace," he repeated, like he was testing the weight of it. "Don't say anything about my name and my personality being opposites. I've heard it. It's not original." He hadn't been going to say that, but the fact that she'd preemptively defended against it made him look at her differently. Something recalibrating behind his eyes. "I wasn't going to say that," he said. "Good." She put her earbud in. This time it stayed for almost 6 minutes. When she took it out again, it was because the train was slowing for her stop and she needed to gather herself. She stood, pulled her bag onto her shoulder, and looked down at Han Seo-jun, who was still sitting in his impossible middle seat with his rings and his bracelet and his expression that had started the journey as bored and was currently doing something she didn't have a category for yet. "You should move to the window seat," she said. "You're making everyone stand." He blinked. "That's the point, I know." She gave him a small, cheerful nod. "But it seems inefficient." She moved toward the doors, then turned back. "Also, your bracelet is cool." "I meant that." The doors opened. Grace Mensa walked out of Seo-jun's world as casually as she had walked into it. Earphones still trailing from one hand, tote bag swinging, already mentally calculating whether the tteokbokki cart would still be open. Han Seo-jun watched the doors close, sat in his middle seat, looked at the empty car around him, and for the first time in a very long time thought, "I need to know what happens next." Han Seo-jun was not a man who chased things. This was not arrogance, it was logistics. In his 33 years of life, and specifically in the 12 years since he had stepped into the position that made grown men rearrange their subway seating habits, things had come to him. Information came to him. Opportunities came to him. People who wanted something from him came to him and stood in his office with very straight backs and said what they needed to say and waited. He had never needed to pursue. The architecture of his life had been built specifically so that he would never have to. And yet, it was 11:47 p.m. on a Friday, and he was sitting at the desk in his private office on the 14th floor of a building that officially housed a logistics company and unofficially housed everything that mattered about his operation. And he had been, there was no dignified way to say this, thinking about the woman from the train. Not in the way that required privacy. In the way that required answers. She had sat down next to him. That was the thing his brain kept returning to, the way a tongue returns to a gap in the teeth. She had looked at the empty seats. He had watched her look, watched her calculate, and she had sat down. Not with the energy of someone making a statement or issuing a challenge or trying to impress him. With the energy of someone whose feet hurt and who had identified a solution. And then she had gone to sleep. And then she had refused to admit she'd gone to sleep, with an architectural commitment to the lie that he still found, privately, extraordinary. An intermittent cervical recalibration condition, he thought. And then he had to put his pen down and look at the ceiling for a moment. He had laughed on the train. Actually laughed. He couldn't remember the last time something had surprised a laugh out of him. Not the kind he performed at dinners, not the kind that was a social mechanism, but the involuntary kind, the kind that starts in the chest. Before the brain has approved it. She had done that. With a made-up medical condition and zero awareness that she should probably be nervous. Or, and this was the part that had been rotating in his mind like a particularly interesting piece of code. She had been completely aware and had decided it wasn't relevant. I've also had a genuinely terrible day. My feet are making sounds they've never made before, and you're not pointing anything at me. Han Seo-jun pressed his thumb against his lower lip and thought about that sentence. She knew. She had understood exactly what the empty seats meant, and she had made a risk assessment, and the conclusion of that assessment had been, I'm just trying to get home. Not reckless. Not fearless in the performative way that some men tried around him, the way that was just fear wearing a costume. Genuinely, structurally unbothered. Like the threat level he represented had been measured against the threat level of standing on a packed train with sore feet and had simply lost. He respected that. Against his better judgment and every precedent he had set for himself regarding the keeping of professional distance from strangers, he found it deeply, unreasonably interesting. Seo-jun SSI, his second-in-command, Oh Tae-yong, appeared in the doorway with a tablet and the expression of a man who had learned to read rooms. He read this one immediately. You've been staring at the ceiling for 11 minutes. I've been thinking about the logistics of meeting someone again when you don't have their contact information and also didn't ask for it. Tae-yong, who had been with Seo-jun for 8 years and had therefore survived things that would have retired most people, processed this sentence carefully. Is this a work situation? No. A beat. Do you need me to find someone? Seo-jun looked at him, then looked back at the ceiling. Her name is Grace Mensah, Ghanaian. Works in IT. She mentioned a company, Kongdae Systems. She lives somewhere reachable from the Mapogu line, because that's where she got off. He paused. That's everything I have. Taeyong wrote nothing down because he didn't need to. Timeline. I don't need surveillance. I need. Seo-jun paused, aware of how the next sentence was going to sound. I just want to know she's a real person. Taeyong looked at him for a long moment. She sat next to me on the train, Seo-jun said, by way of explanation. Ah, said Taeyong, in the tone of someone who understood that this was apparently significant. And she said my bracelet was cool. There was a very long silence. I'll find her social media, Taeyong said, and left without any further questions. Because in 8 years he had learned that some things were above his pay grade, and this was clearly one of them. Took 4 hours. 4 hours which Seo-jun spent doing actual work, reviewing 3 contracts, approving a shipment schedule, having a 15-minute call with someone in Busan who needed reminding of certain agreements, and then Taeyong came back with a tablet and a look of mild personal amusement that he was technically too professional to be wearing. Instagram, he said, holding out the tablet. And LinkedIn. The LinkedIn will tell you more. Seo-jun took the tablet. The Instagram profile of one Grace Mensah was, he scrolled, chaotic in the best possible way. The pinned post was a video of her explaining, at length, why the way Koreans ate ramen was superior to every other method and anyone who disagreed could meet her at a location she would provide. It had 34,000 views. The comments were in 3 languages. She had responded to approximately 40% of them with the specific energy of someone who did not have a PR manager and did not want one. He scrolled further. There was a post about a server migration that had gone badly in which she had documented, in real time, every stage of her emotional deterioration, with photos of her own face. At each stage, the final photo was her head on keyboard, a single thumbs up visible at the edge of frame. Caption, "We survived. The server did not deserve us. Good night." There was a video of her attempting to make jollof rice in her Seoul apartment and providing a running commentary on the differences between Ghanaian and Nigerian jollof that was apparently so inflammatory that the comments had become a diplomatic incident. There was a post that was simply a photo of her train window at night with the caption, "The Seoul subway after 6 p.m. is a sociological experiment and I am the control group." This had been posted at what appeared to be roughly the time she would have been on his train. Han Seo-jun stared at that caption for a very long time. "I am the control group." He handed the tablet back to Taeyong. "Send me the LinkedIn." The LinkedIn told him what he suspected. Grace Mensah, Senior IT Infrastructure Technician at Kangdae Systems, Seoul. 7 years of experience. Multiple certifications. Her summary section said, in full, "I fix things that other people have given up on. If you're looking at my profile because something is broken, yes, I can probably help. Rates available on request." He found her funny. He was fully aware this was not a normal thing for him. He was not, professionally or personally, a man who found many things funny. He found things interesting, and occasionally he found them satisfying, but funny required a kind of open frequency that his life had mostly trained out of him. Grace Mensah was broadcasting on that frequency without apparent effort or intention, and it was extremely inconvenient. He followed her Instagram from an account he used that was not connected to his name. It had 47 followers and followed 12 accounts and had no posts, which in retrospect was probably suspicious, but he was not an Instagram native and was doing his best. She accepted the follow request within 3 minutes, which meant her phone was on and she was awake. He thought about the kind of person who accepted follow requests from faceless accounts at 2 a.m. and concluded she was either extremely trusting or had made a threat assessment and decided a 47-follower account was below threshold. Both were plausible. He put his phone down, picked it up again. She had posted an Instagram story since he had been looking at her profile. It was a video, vertical, clearly filmed in a kitchen. She was eating something, rice from what he could tell, standing directly in front of an open refrigerator, which she appeared to be using as ambient lighting, and she was saying, to nobody visible, "Day 612 in Seoul. My feet have filed a formal complaint with HR. The complaint has been reviewed and denied. We are moving forward." She ate another bite, pointed at the camera with her spoon. "If you're watching this at 2 a.m., make better choices than me. Except the rice." The rice was the right call. She ended the video. Seo-jun put his phone face down on the desk and looked at the wall. He was going to have to talk to her again. He understood this now as a logistical fact, the way he understood supply chains and negotiation timelines. The only question was the mechanism. He was not going to DM her from the 47-follower account. He had lines. The problem solved itself with the unreasonable convenience of things that are supposed to happen. It was Monday, 2 days after the train. He was in Mapogu. He had business there, legitimate business, a building he co-owned with a business partner who ran a restaurant group, and he was walking from the building to his car when he heard, from the tteokbokki cart on the corner, a voice conducting what sounded like a detailed negotiation. In Korean, with full conjugation, and a Ghanaian accent that hit the syllables from a completely original angle that somehow landed correctly anyway. "I understand the price went up," the voice was saying. "I respect that. The market is the market. But I've been coming here for 2 years and I feel that has to count for something in the relational economy of this transaction." The cart owner, an elderly man named Mr. Beck who Seo-jun had been aware of peripherally for years because his driver bought from this cart sometimes, was laughing. Actually laughing, which based on the driver's reports was not something Mr. Beck did with most customers. Not a discount necessarily, just an acknowledgement. A spiritual acknowledgement. A vibe-based price consideration. Seo-jun stopped walking. Grace Mensah was standing at the tteokbokki cart in a jacket that looked like it cost significantly more than the item she was currently negotiating for, her bag over one shoulder, gesturing with the kind of reasonable-sounding, completely unreasonable confidence he now recognized as her baseline mode of operating in the world. Mr. Beck gave her an extra piece. She received this with the energy of a diplomatic victory, paid, turned around to move to the eating ledge on the side, and stopped. She looked at Seo-jun. He looked at her. She looked at the street around them, apparently doing a quick calculation about whether this was coincidence or something that required a different classification. "You live here?" she said. "I have business here. She looked at him a moment longer. Then she looked down at her tekbaki. Then back at him, with the expression of someone whose social programming was telling them something but whose feet were already moving toward the eating ledge. She sat down, looked at him. "Did you want to stand there or?" she said. He walked over, stood beside her, not quite sitting, because the eating ledge was small and he was not entirely sure about the geometry of this situation. "You have a car," she said. It wasn't a question. She'd clearly clocked the vehicle and the driver. "Yes. And you're standing at a street food cart. You're sitting at one. I live 4 blocks from here. This is my cart." She said this with territorial energy. "This is my relationship with Mr. Beck. Why are you here?" "I told you. Business." She ate a piece of tekbaki, looked at him sideways. "You followed me on Instagram." He said nothing. 47 followers, she said. "No posts. Profile picture is a mountain. Followed me at 2 a.m. She ate another piece. "That's a weird account to accept a request from, and I almost didn't, but then I thought, the only people following random people at 2 a.m. are either bots or people who know you in real life and don't want you to know it's them." She looked at him directly. "It was you." There was, in his professional experience, no value in denying a thing that someone already knew. "Yes," he said. She nodded slowly, the nod of someone whose hypothesis has been confirmed. "Okay," she said, in a tone he couldn't fully interpret. "Okay. I mean," she waved her spoon vaguely, "you're a well-known person. You could have found me 6 different ways if you'd wanted to. The Instagram thing is actually on the less alarming end of that spectrum." She paused. "Also, you liked my jollof rice post, and that was kind of you because it was a controversial post and I appreciated the support." He hadn't liked the jollof rice post intentionally. He had been scrolling and his thumb had moved without consulting him, and then he had very quickly unliked it and spent a moment hoping she hadn't seen it, which was apparently a futile hope. "You saw that," he said. "Notifications move fast." She looked completely unbothered. "Why did you unlike it? The Ghanaian-Nigerian jollof discourse is real and valid and I stand by the content." "I didn't want to." He stopped, started again. "I was being careful. About me knowing you were looking." "Yes." She looked at him. Something in her expression softened slightly, not warmly exactly, but with understanding, the way someone recognizes a behavior they know the shape of. "You don't do this a lot," she said. "Talk to people. Like, voluntarily." "No." She ate the last piece in her container, stood, tossed the cup neatly in the bin. Then she looked at him for a moment with her head tilted slightly, the same calculating look she'd had on the train when she'd been assembling the pieces. "What do you want, Han Seo-jun, from talking to me?" He had thought about this, actually, in the way he thought about things methodically without sentiment. "I found you interesting," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Interesting? You sat next to me on a train." "I did. When everyone else stood." "Yes, I was there. I don't meet many people," he said, which was true in the way that matters, not counting the people he met for work, which was everyone, but the people he met for no reason other than they had appeared in his life and changed the atmospheric pressure of the room. "Who don't adjust. When they see me." Grace looked at him for a long moment. He held it. He was good at holding things. "I adjusted," she said finally. "I just adjusted internally." A small pause. "Your reputation precedes you. I'm not oblivious. But you still Saturday. My feet hurt more than I was scared." She tilted her head. "That's not a compliment to you specifically. That's just an accurate account of the math." He almost laughed. He could feel it, the same chest-first thing from the train. "I want to talk to you again," he said. "That's what I want." She looked at him for another moment. Then she pulled out her phone, held it out. Then put your number in like a normal human being instead of lurking on Instagram at 2 a.m. He took the phone, typed his number, handed it back. She looked at the contact. You put it as Train Man. You know my name. Train Man is funnier. She saved it, put her phone away. I have to go. I have a system audit at 8 tomorrow and the junior tech who I will not name has been making confident choices again and I need to undo them. She picked up her bag. Don't be weird about this. Don't send 17 messages. Don't do a thing where you're suddenly everywhere I go. One of those would be a coincidence. She pointed between him and the cart. 2 is a pattern. 3 is a conversation with my colleague who has a cousin in the police department and I'm not above using that. He stared at her. I know what you could do, she said cheerfully. And I'm telling you anyway. That's me being friendly. She gave him a brief, bright smile. Good night, Han Seo-jun. She walked away, down the street, past the streetlight, gone. Seo-jun stood at the tekbaki cart in Mapogu, in the mild Seoul night, and looked at the space she had been. Mr. Beck, from behind his cart, said something. Seo-jun turned. What? She comes every day, the old man said pleasantly. Very funny girl. Very loud opinions about food. He began cleaning his cart with the unhurried rhythm of end of day. She's the only customer I give extra to. Seo-jun looked back down the street. She's something, he said, mostly to himself. Mr. Beck made a sound of agreement. Come back tomorrow. She'll be here. A pause. Don't stand there looking. Sit. Han Seo-jun, who had not been told to sit by anyone in approximately 11 years, sat. The first text came from her. This was not what he expected. He had her number, she had his, and he had been doing the logistical calculation of when and how to deploy the first message with the seriousness he applied to contract negotiations, because first contact sets tone and tone matters, and he was still working through the variables when his phone buzzed at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday with a message from a contact he had saved as Grace, Train, because he was more sentimental than he admitted. Quick question and I need you to answer honestly. He looked at the message, set down his coffee, typed, okay. If someone, hypothetically, had accidentally installed a security patch on a server without checking the dependency chain first, and then that server became briefly and technically unavailable to the entire fourth floor of a corporation, what would be the ethical timeline for telling the senior technician about this? He read it twice. Is this hypothetical? Extremely hypothetical. Why would you even ask that? The ethical timeline would be immediately. Okay, but define immediately. Before the senior technician finds out from someone else. There was a pause of approximately 4 minutes. Too late for that timeline. New question. How long does it take for a server to become available again if someone very capable and talented and not me fixes it? Depends on the patch. Let's say it was a patch that should not have been touched by someone who described themselves as pretty confident about this one. Han Seo-jun sat at his desk at 7:44 a.m. and felt the laugh move through him before he could stop it. Taeyong, who was across the room reviewing something, looked up. Nothing, Seo-jun said, and turned slightly away from him. How long have you been there? Since 6:30. I got here early specifically to fix this before anyone arrived, and now it is 7:44 and people are arriving. Can you fix it? Obviously I can fix it, I just need 20 more minutes and for everyone to stop emailing me. About the 4th floor. Then fix it. I'll be here. Another pause. Shorter. Why are you awake at 7 a.m.? I'm always awake at 7 a.m. That's bleak. Okay, I have to go perform a miracle. Talk later. She sent a single emoji after this, a wrench, and went offline. He looked at the wrench emoji for a moment. Put his phone down. Picked it up. Put it down again. Taeyong was looking at him with the careful expression of a man who had decided not to ask questions but was cataloging everything for future reference. The 4th floor of Kongdae Systems has no server access, Seo-jun said, by way of nothing. Noted, said Taeyong, who noted it. She messaged him at 8:52 a.m. 4th floor is back. The junior tech has been spoken to. I used my quiet voice, which is actually worse than my loud voice. All is well. How are you? This last part, how are you, was so casual and conversational that it took him a moment to process it as a genuine question. People did not ask him how he was. They asked him what he needed, what he thought, what his decision was. How are you assumed a kind of mutual ground that he had not occupied with anyone new in a very long time. He typed, "Fine. The server situation sounds like it resolved faster than expected. I am exceptional at my job. This is documented. On the LinkedIn. You looked at my LinkedIn." He had, in fact, looked at the LinkedIn twice. "You made it public. Touché, train man, are you free this week?" He looked at his calendar, which Taeyong maintained with military precision and which was full in the way that his weeks were always full. "For what?" "I found a restaurant that apparently does this Sichuan Ghanaian fusion thing, and I don't know if it's going to be amazing or a crime against food, but I feel like I need a witness. Someone who can appreciate the stakes." He read this message. Read it again. "You want to go to dinner? I want to go to a potentially problematic restaurant, and I want someone with me who won't just be polite about it if it's bad. You seem like someone who would be honest about bad food." He did not, generally, have dinner with people he had known for 5 days. He did not, generally, have dinner with people for reasons that were not professional. He did not, generally, say yes to things impulsively. Wednesday, he typed, 7 o'clock. Send me the address. She sent a location pin and then, "Dress code is whatever you want, but I will be dressed like I have opinions, just so you know." He did not know exactly what that meant. He found that he was looking forward to finding out. She arrived at the restaurant 8 minutes late, which she announced the moment she walked in by finding him at the table and saying without preamble, I know, the bus was doing something philosophical with its timing." Before sitting down and immediately picking up the menu with both hands like it was a document requiring legal review. She was wearing deep burgundy and gold, the colors moving together in a way that made him think of something ceremonial, something with weight to it. And her hair was up in an elaborate wrapped style that he didn't have vocabulary for but which looked like it had required both skill and intention. He did not say anything about any of this because he was not that person and also because she was already talking. Okay, so the fusion concept here is interesting because Sichuan and Ghanaian cooking both have this thing with bold base flavors. The Sichuan peppercorn does this numbing thing and Ghanaian food does this layered thing with the palm oil and the fermented stuff. And theoretically they should be compatible, but the execution could go many ways. She looked over the menu at him. "You look like you've eaten at nice places." "Yes." "Does that mean you have strong opinions about fusion cuisine, or that you'll accept anything if it's plated well?" "The first one." "Good." She looked back at the menu. "I can't eat with people who accept mediocrity in food. It tells you something about a person." She turned a page. "Seo Jun." Why does everyone call you something else?" He looked up. "What?" "I've been in Seoul 2 years. I hear things. People don't call you Han Seo Jun. They call you something else." She said it, the name that moved through certain circles, the one that had nothing to do with what his mother had named him. She said it the way she said everything matter-of-factly, without theater. "Why 2 names?" He set down his menu. "One is a name. One is a title. Like a work name. Something like that." She thought about this. "In Ghana we have this thing, your family name, your given name, your day name, the name you get based on what day you were born. I was born on a Tuesday. Abina." She said it differently, the syllables landing with a different weight, something that felt like it came from a different register entirely. "My grandmother calls me that. Nobody else does." He looked at her. "Abina." "Don't," she said immediately. "You haven't earned that. I'm just giving you context. For the 2-name thing. For the 2-name thing." She folded the menu with a decision. "I'm getting the groundnut Sichuan lamb thing. If it's bad, I'm going to be very verbal about it." "I know," he said, which surprised her enough that she laughed. A real laugh, sudden, like it caught her off guard. The food was, against most probability, excellent. They stayed for 2.5 hours. This was how it started, not with a moment, not with a declaration, but with the accumulation of ordinary extraordinary things. Texts at unreasonable hours. A standing arrangement at Mr. Beck's cart on Wednesday evenings that neither of them formally proposed but both of them kept. Restaurant visits. Arguments about food with the dedication of people who cared about the outcome. A series of voice messages Grace started sending instead of texts when she was walking somewhere, because she thought faster than she typed. Which meant Seo Jun would receive 3-minute audio clips at random points in his day of Grace Mensa, narrating her observations about Seoul, about her work, about a video she'd seen, about something that had happened on the train. He started listening to them twice. He did not tell anyone this. The thing that nobody had warned him about Grace, that he was discovering in real time in installments, was that she was genuinely structurally curious. Not in the social way, the polite question way. In the way of someone who wanted to actually understand things and was not embarrassed to ask when she didn't. "Explain the hierarchy to me," she said one Wednesday at the cart, eating with the focused contentment of someone who had stopped negotiating and started just enjoying. "Not the," she waved a hand. "Not the criminal part specifically. The social part. How does it actually work?" He looked at her. "Why?" "Because I've been here 2 years and I understand the corporate hierarchy and the family hierarchy and the age hierarchy, and I understand approximately 60% of why people behave the way they do in this city, but there's this other layer that I can see affecting things and I don't have a map for it." She looked at him directly. "You're the only person I know who would explain it honestly. Most people don't ask. Most people are scared of the answer. I just want to understand how the city works." She ate another piece. "You don't have to if it's, I don't know, sensitive." He thought about it. "It's like any hierarchy," he said finally. "There are rules. There are relationships. There's a structure that's been in place longer than either of us has been alive." He paused. "The difference is that the rules are not written anywhere and the consequences of breaking them are not administered by a court." She nodded slowly. "So it's all relational. Everything is relational. That's actually not that different from how things work back home," she said, almost to herself. "Not the," she made a vague gesture that he had come to understand meant the violence part, specifically, "but the structure. The way things actually run on relationships and history rather than official channels." She looked at him. "Does that bother you? When people from outside see it and think it's simpler than it is?" "It used to," he said. "Now I don't think about what people see. Because you don't let people close enough to see." He looked at her. She said it without weight. Just an observation. The way she observed everything, without apology or particular delicacy. Just the fact of it laid out plainly. "Yes," he said. She nodded. Accepted this. Moved on. "Okay, so tell me about Chuziak. I want to actually understand it, not the Wikipedia version." And this was also the thing about her. She never held a door open longer than it needed to be. She asked the real question and received the real answer, and then she moved forward, without making the moment larger than it was. He had never met anyone who handled him the way she did. Not with the deference that exhausted him, not with the performance of being unimpressed that some people tried, but with a kind of easy, matter-of-fact engagement that treated him like a person who had information she wanted and also occasionally like a person who was being funny without knowing it. He had started, quietly, to look forward to Wednesdays in a way that made Taeyong give him looks he pretended not to notice. The cultural education was not one-directional. "You've never met a black person," Grace said one evening. They were at her apartment. She had invited him over to watch a film she wanted his opinion on. A Korean thriller she'd been told was excellent. And he had accepted because his life had apparently reorganized itself around accepting things Grace Mensa proposed. Her apartment was exactly what he'd expected. Extremely organized in the areas that related to her work, a setup on one desk. That looked like a small operations center, 3 monitors, cables managed with the precision of someone who arranged cables professionally, and absolutely chaotic everywhere else. There were books on multiple surfaces. A house plant that appeared to be thriving despite what seemed like occasional neglect. 2 mugs on the coffee table, one clearly older than the other. "Before me," he said. He was on her couch, which was comfortable in the way that things chosen for function over appearance tend to be. "I've seen." "That's not what I said." She handed him tea that she'd made with a focus he'd noticed she applied to making tea. It was the one thing she did slowly. "You've seen black people. You've not met one. Like actually talked to." He thought about this honestly. "No." "Okay." She sat cross-legged on the other end of the couch. "So you've probably got some stuff in your head from media and general cultural osmosis. What's the first thing that comes up?" "Honest. I'm not going to." "Seo Jun." She looked at him. "We're past the part where you manage what you say to me. What's the first thing?" A pause. He picked his words carefully. "I had assumptions about loudness, energy. That was the first thing I noticed was different. You were not." He stopped. "What you expected." You were louder than I expected, he said, which was true. But not in the way I expected the loudness to be. She tilted her head. Explain that. I expected, he searched. Performance. The loudness that's for other people. He looked at his tea. Yours is just yours. You're loud because you're interested in things, not because you're trying to be noticed. Grace looked at him for a moment. That's actually a very observant distinction. You asked for honest. I did. She seemed to turn this over. The stuff in your head from media? Is it mostly American? Mostly. Okay, so here is your first lesson in understanding Grace Mensa specifically. She settled further into her corner of the couch. I'm Ghanaian. West African. The media version of blackness you've absorbed is probably 70% American with some European mixed in, and while we are all related, diaspora is real. I am not that. I grew up in Accra. My grandmother woke up every morning and poured libation for the ancestors before she made breakfast. My father argued about football with the same energy other men argue about politics. My mother ran a fabric business and could look at a textile from across a room and tell you its region of origin and approximate age. She paused. None of that is in anything you've watched. He was listening with the attention he gave to things that mattered. Tell me more. She looked at him. You actually want to know? Yes. Most people say that, and then their eyes go slightly unfocused after about 90 seconds. I'm not most people. No, she said, and something in her expression shifted slightly. Not softening exactly, more like recalibrating. The way her face moved when she confirmed a hypothesis. You're really not, she told him. Not all at once, it happened in pieces the way real knowledge always transfers over weeks and sessions and Wednesday evenings. She told him about Kent and what the patterns meant, speaking with the authority of someone who had been educated about this by women who considered it essential information. She told him about high life music, pulling it up on her phone and making him actually listen, properly listen, not just hear it, the guitar here, hear that? That's a conversation between the guitar and the rhythm. They're answering each other. She told him about jollof rice with the intensity of someone settling a matter of civilizational importance, spending 40 minutes on the Ghanaian-Nigerian debate with citations and personal testimony, and what she described as receipts that were actually just her grandmother's recipe versus a recipe she had screenshotted from a Nigerian food blogger, and annotated with disagreements. This part, she said, pointing at the annotated screenshot. This part is where she goes wrong. She adds tomato paste at the beginning. You add it in the middle. The middle addition caramelizes differently. You're very serious about this. About jollof rice? About everything you care about. She stopped, looked at him. Is that a bad thing? No, he said, immediately and with more certainty than he usually applied to personal statements. He paused. It's one of the things I find interesting about you. One of the things, she said, with her head tilted. There's a list. She looked like she wanted to say something and then decided not to. She looked back at the annotated screenshot. You should try making it. Jollof. I'll supervise. You don't trust me. I don't trust anyone with jollof. I'll supervise you the way I supervise junior technicians. Close oversight, running commentary, full veto rights. She smiled, and it was the real one, the one that happened when she was comfortable, that had a warmth to it she didn't always lead with. Don't take it personally. This is a high-stakes dish. He started learning Chui phrases. Not because she asked, she never asked him to, would probably have found it presumptuous. But he listened to the words she used, the exclamations that came out when she was surprised or amused, the things she said under her breath in a language that wasn't Korean or English, and he looked them up. He practiced the pronunciation privately, the way he had always learned things. Privately, thoroughly, without announcement. She found out on a Thursday 3 weeks into this arrangement, when she said something sharp and funny about a car that had cut her off as they were walking, and then looked at him and he responded in Chui quietly with a phrase that meant that person made a poor choice. Grace stopped walking, stared at him. Where did you get that? I've been learning. You. She pointed at him. The pointing was accompanied by an expression he had not seen on her before, which was the specific face of someone who was surprised and trying not to show how much. You've been learning Chui. Some. She stared at him a moment longer. Then she turned and kept walking. He kept pace with her, watching the side of her face. Grace. I'm processing, she said. Give me a minute. It's not. Seo Jun. She stopped again, turned to face him on the pavement with people moving around them, Seoul doing its evening thing in every direction. She looked at him with an expression he had learned to read as her doing something internal that she was not going to fully report on. That was, she stopped. You didn't have to do that. I know. Why did you? He looked at her, thought about the honest answer, which was, because you opened a door I didn't know existed and I wanted to be able to walk through it properly. Said instead simply, because it mattered to you. She looked at him for a long, steady moment. The city moved around them. Okay, she said finally, quietly. Okay. She started walking again, but she fell into step beside him differently. Slightly closer than before, the distance recalibrated by something that neither of them named yet. Teach me something in Korean, she said, as if the previous moment hadn't happened. Something I wouldn't learn in a class. Like what? Something real. Something people actually say. He thought. There's a phrase unchiopta. It means someone who can't read the room, can't feel the atmosphere around them. Nunchi, she repeated, the vowels slightly different but recognizable. It's a concept. There's no real English equivalent. It's the social awareness of reading what's not being said, the emotional temperature of a situation. She was quiet for a moment. We have something like that. In Chui. Adween. The sense of what someone means beyond what they say. She paused. People think Africans are expressive because we're loud. But a lot of communication is what you don't say. Same here. Ha! She walked. We're more similar than the geography suggests. He didn't say anything, but he thought, yes, that has been occurring to me for weeks. The evening she really laughed, the deep laugh, the one that bent her forward slightly with the force of it, was a Wednesday 2 months in when he had attempted to make jollof rice under her supervision and it had gone, by any objective measure, extremely badly. Not dangerously. Just completely, specifically wrong in ways she had predicted and warned him about, and he had said I understand too and then proceeded to not apply. I told you about the heat, she said, from her position leaning against the counter with her arms crossed, at a volume that was not quite yelling but contained the energy of something that had decided to be restrained. I specifically said medium heat and you looked directly at me and said okay and then turned it to high. You thought. She looked at the pot. The rice was not burnt, exactly, but it had opinions about its situation. What did you think? That higher heat would what? Still not yelling. Barely. Speed up the caramelization. She turned to face him fully. The thing I told you takes time because it takes time. You can't speed up caramelization. That's not how physics works. She looked at the pot again. Back at him. Have you ever cooked before? I have staff. Of course you do. She pushed off the counter and came to look in the pot with the expression of a doctor reviewing difficult test results. It might be recoverable. Might. She looked at him sideways. You're lucky the base sauce is good. I did the base sauce. You said you would supervise. I supervised. You didn't listen. Those are different failures. But she was already moving, adjusting the heat, adding something. From a small container she'd brought herself, stirring with the focused competence of someone performing a rescue operation. Next time you do exactly what I say, word for word. My grandmother didn't teach me this recipe for it to be dismantled by someone who has staff. Your grandmother taught you. Every school holiday from age 7. I had to watch first, then assist, then do it while she watched, then do it alone and bring her the result. She stirred. She graded it. Verbally. With comments. He looked at her. She sounds like you. Grace paused in her stirring. Glanced at him. Something warm moved through her expression and then was contained. The way she contained things she didn't want to make large. People say I'm like her, yeah. A small pause. She would have had opinions about you. Good or bad. Both probably. She had opinions about everyone. The fact that you learned Chui phrases would have gotten you points. The jollof situation would have cost you some. She tasted the rice. Made a face that was not quite satisfied but was cautiously optimistic. It's going to be okay. Don't tell anyone I let this happen. Your reputation is safe with me. My grandmother's reputation is what I'm protecting. She covered the pot, set a timer, turned to find him leaning against the counter on the other side of the kitchen, watching her with the expression she had noticed he wore when he was paying close attention and not trying to conceal it. She looked at him for a moment. What? Nothing, he said, in the way that meant something. Nunchi, she said, which was the first time she had used a Korean concept word at him, and it landed between them with the specific weight of an inside reference that both of them recognized as significant. He smiled. It was a small thing. Han Seo-jun did not smile the way other people smiled. It didn't take over his face. It was a controlled, precise expression, but it was real, which she had learned to read. She told him once that his real expressions were smaller than his performance ones but heavier, and he had looked at her for a long moment afterward without saying anything, which she had correctly interpreted as that was accurate and I'm not going to confirm it. She looked away first. 15 minutes for the rice, she said. You're setting the table. I don't know where. Figure it out. You're a man of resources. He found the dishes, set the table with the precise orderliness of someone who had been correctly taught about tables but had not set one himself in some time. She watched from the kitchen doorway with the rice cooling and her arms crossed. You're checking my work, he said. This is what supervision looks like. Grace. Seo-jun. Thank you, he said. He was still looking at the table. He stopped. Tried again. All of this, the past months. She was quiet for a moment. He turned to look at her. She was wearing an expression he didn't have a full translation for yet. Something that was warm and careful in equal measure. Something that was deciding how much of itself to show. You're a good person, she said. Simply. People have the wrong idea about you. He said nothing. I'm not saying that to be nice. I'm saying it because I've been watching how you actually operate for 2 months and the evidence supports the conclusion. She pushed off the doorframe. Now sit down. If this rice is salvageable, you're going to eat it and tell me it's the best thing you've ever had. What if it isn't? Then you're going to lie convincingly and we'll never speak of this again. He sat. The rice was, against considerable odds, very good. He told her so. She accepted this with the dignity of someone who had never doubted it. The thing about not planning for something is that it happens anyway. Grace Mensa was, by nature and by training, a planner. Not in the rigid schedule every hour sense, she was too chaotic for that and knew it, but in the deeper sense of knowing what she was doing and why she was doing it and what the expected outcome was. She planned her migrations. She planned her finances. She planned her career trajectory with the spreadsheet energy of someone who had watched her parents work too hard for too little and had decided early that she would be the generation that broke the pattern. She had not planned Han Seo-jun. She had planned a train ride home. She had planned to sit down because her feet required it. Everything after that had happened the way good code sometimes happened. You were building something with a specific function in mind and somewhere in the architecture something elegant emerged that you hadn't designed for, and you had to decide whether to leave it in or refactor it out. She had left it in. This was the internal language she used to avoid calling it what it was, which she was aware of and had chosen anyway because naming things made them real and real things required decisions. It was October now. She had known Han Seo-jun for 4 months, which meant she had known him for approximately the same amount of time it took a proper server infrastructure to be fully built and stress-tested. She had decided this was a useful analogy and was holding on to it. He had become, and this was the word she kept arriving at, circling and reluctantly accepting, important. Not in a category she had framework for. Not quite friendship, though it was that. Not quite something else, though it was also approaching that, in the way that water approaches boiling. Technically still water, technically not there yet, but there was something happening at a molecular level that was irreversible. She was aware of this. She was choosing, for the time being, not to do anything about it. The situation that forced her hand was, characteristically, not romantic. It was a Thursday, early November, and Grace was having what she would later describe to Bora as a day that had no business existing. It started with the junior technician, a different one, new hire, full of confidence and questionable judgment, who had decided that a routine system audit was actually an opportunity for creative interpretation and had done something to 3 interconnected servers that Grace could not, in the first 40 minutes of investigating, fully understand. She understood the damage. She did not understand the logic, which was more disturbing, because you could not fix what you could not comprehend. By noon she had fixed it, but the kind of fixing that cost something, the deep concentration, the sustained problem-solving that left her brain feeling like a phone at 2% battery. She was running on her third coffee and the specific adrenaline of having held an entire department's operations together through willpower and professional stubbornness. By 3 in the afternoon, her manager had called her into an office conversation that was not quite a reprimand. She had done nothing wrong, the situation was resolved, but was one of those conversations where a person who had never written a line of code in their life had opinions about how code should be managed, and Grace had to sit across a desk and listen with a professional expression while internally she ran a calculation about the cost of saying what she actually thought versus the benefit of continued employment. She said the professional version. She smiled the professional smile. She went back to her desk. At 4:47 p.m., she received an email from a freelance client who had been slow to pay, citing reasons that changed every time she asked, and had now apparently decided the solution was to dispute the work quality on a project she had completed 6 weeks ago, and which had performed exactly as specified and better. Grace read the email, read it again, closed her laptop with a controlled gentleness that was doing a lot of heavy lifting. She messaged Bora, "Are you free tonight?" Bora replied immediately, "Date with Juno, sorry. Tomorrow?" She messaged Nadia, "Any chance you're home?" Nadia, "On shift until midnight. Everything okay?" She stared at her phone. She was fine. She wanted to be clear about this in her own internal accounting. She was fine, nothing was wrong in the serious sense. It was just one of those days that accumulated weight until you needed to put it somewhere, and the places she usually put it were unavailable. She would go home. She would eat something. She would watch something angry and satisfying, one of those Korean dramas where someone gets revenge with composure and a good coat. She would be fine. She was halfway to the station when her phone buzzed. "Are you at work still?" It was Seo Jun. She looked at the message. Looked at the gray November sky above Mapogu. "Just leaving," she typed. "Bad day. Don't ask." A pause. "I wasn't going to ask. I was going to say I'm near your building." She stopped walking. I was going to return the book you left at the restaurant 2 weeks ago. I've had it." She had completely forgotten about the book. She looked at the message. Looked at the sky again. The sky was not providing useful input. "Okay," she typed. He was outside her building when she got there, which should have been notable. Han Seo-jun, standing on a residential street in Mapogu in the November dark, holding a book, but had somehow become, over 4 months, a thing she was capable of receiving without her system crashing. This was its own form of information, and she was filing it under things to think about later. He looked at her face when she got close enough. Said nothing for a moment. Then, "Come on." "Where?" "You'll see." She looked at him. "Seo-jun, I am very tired and my capacity for surprises is..." "It's not a surprise. It's a location." He started walking. Looked back. "You can see your building from where we're going. It'll take 6 minutes." She followed him because she was tired and he was already walking, and the decision-making part of her brain had clocked out at approximately 4:47 p.m. 6 minutes turned out to be accurate. He took her to the rooftop of a building 2 streets over, accessed by a stairwell that suggested he had been here before and had some arrangement with whoever owned it, that had a view of the Han River on one side and the lit sprawl of Seoul on the other. Someone had, at some point, put 2 chairs up here and a small table, and on the table there was already tea in a flask that was still warm when she touched it. She looked at the tea. Looked at him. "You planned this," she said. "I brought tea." "That's not planning." "You have a flask." "That's planning." She sat down in one of the chairs because her feet had voted unanimously. "Why?" He sat, poured tea into a cup and held it out to her. "You said bad day. You said don't ask." He poured his own. "So I didn't ask." Grace looked at the tea in her hands. Looked at the city. Seoul in November at night it was its own thing, the lights running along the river, the bridge cables lit up, the density of it, the way it kept moving even in the cold. She had fallen in love with this city in a way she hadn't predicted. She had fallen in love with a lot of things in Seoul she hadn't predicted. The day was specifically bad in 3 consecutive ways, she said, which was not what she'd planned to say, which was nothing. Like it was designed. "Tell me." "You said you weren't going to ask." "I said I wasn't going to ask if you were okay. You clearly know you're okay. I'm asking about the day." She looked at him. He was looking at the river, giving her the angle of his face rather than direct eye contact, which she recognized as a thing he did when he was making space. Not pressing, not watching for her reaction, just being present in a way that had no agenda. She told him about the servers. Not the technical details. She'd learned early that his eyes glazed slightly past a certain level of infrastructure specificity, which she found endearing in someone who otherwise had opinions about everything, but the texture of it. The frustration of damage she couldn't immediately read. The specific exhaustion of being the person everyone waited for to fix things because she was the person who could fix things, which was a privilege she knew and also sometimes a weight. She told him about the manager meeting. He listened to this one with a specific quality of attention that was different, a stillness that she recognized as controlled response. He had opinions about the situation that he was managing. Say it, she said. What? Whatever you're not saying. He looked at her then. The person who caused the problem should be having the meeting. Not you. Yes. She wrapped both hands around her cup. But I'm the one who fixed it, which makes me the senior stakeholder in the outcome, which means I get to hear the concerns of people who weren't there. She exhaled. It's fine. It's just tiring. Tiring. She nodded. And then the client email. She told him about the client email. His expression, across the small table, moved through several things without landing on any of them. Forward me the email, he said. She looked at him. Seo Jun. As a reader, to understand the situation. I know what it means when you say forward me the email and someone owes you money. I'm not going to. You absolutely are going to. And I love you for it. She stopped. The word landed between them and sat there. She had said it the way you say it in a particular register, the casual, affectionate register, the one that means you're a person I care about and I'm registering that, but it had come out with more weight than she'd calibrated for, and they both heard it. And the air on the rooftop did something. She looked at her tea. He looked at the river. A moment passed. A very full moment. I'm going to deal with the client myself, she said at normal volume, with normal Grace Mensa energy. I have documentation. I have the project specs, the completion confirmation, the performance metrics. He's going to pay the invoice and he's going to do it before the end of the month because I'm going to write an email that makes that the obvious conclusion. You're good at those. I'm exceptional at those. I once resolved a contract dispute over email in 40 minutes. The other party thanked me afterward, which... She shook her head. That was unusual, but I took it. He was smiling. The small, real one. Don't use your people on this, she said. My people are logistics professionals. Your logistics professionals would frighten the man, and then I'd feel guilty even though he's wrong and it would ruin the win. She looked at him directly. Let me have my own win. He looked back. Okay. Thank you. For not helping. For respecting the process. She settled back in the chair, the city in front of her, the tea warm in her hands, the particular quality of a bad day that had been diffused rather than solved. It was still there, the evidence of it, but it had been put in a different container. A manageable one. How did you know I needed to be outside? You always, he paused. When you've been inside dealing with something difficult, you need to see something large. Distance. You look out windows more on the days when something is wrong. She stared at him. You noticed that. I notice things about you. What else? What? What else do you notice? She wasn't sure what she was doing. She was doing it anyway. He was quiet for a moment. Not the evasive quiet, the considering quiet, the one that meant he was deciding how honest to be and was arriving at completely. You're braver than you let on, he said. You perform the confidence because it works and because it's real, but the actual bravery, the way you move through the world, you don't announce it. You just do it. He looked at the river. You sat next to me on a train. You ate at a cart next to a building full of men who work for me. You invited me into your apartment and showed me your servers and made me stand in your kitchen and didn't manage any of it the way people manage things around me. I wasn't going to treat you differently because of your... I know, he said. That's what I'm saying. You could have. Most people adjust everything, what they say, where they look, how they sit. You adjusted nothing. A small pause. Do you know what that's like? To be with someone who has not adjusted anything. She looked at him. Something was happening in her chest that she was not going to call by its name yet, but which was making her very aware of her breathing. Lonely without it, I think. she said quietly. When everyone adjusts. I think it must be. Yes, he said. Simply, like she had named something that didn't usually get named. They sat with that for a moment. Seo Jun, she said. What are we doing? He turned to look at her. The question was clear. Not what are we doing on this rooftop tonight, but the larger one. The one that had been building its architecture quietly for 4 months and had been waiting for someone to acknowledge the blueprint. I don't know, he said. I know what I'd like to be doing. She looked at him. But I don't, he stopped. Something moved in his expression that she hadn't seen on him before. Careful, almost cautious. I don't know how to do this. I want to be honest about that. Do what? Want something I can't manage the outcome of. He looked at his cup. Everything in my life has a managed outcome. I know the variables. I know the shape of what's going to happen. With you I have a pause that cost him something. No idea. And I find that I would rather be in that situation than any managed one I know. Grace looked at the city. Seoul moved below them, indifferent and brilliant, millions of people doing millions of things, all the simultaneous life of a city that had learned to hold contradiction without resolving it. When I was little, she said, my grandmother used to say, Obra y 3 Kwan, life is a road. And she meant it practically. You walk it, you don't fly over it, you don't know what's after the next bend until you get there. She paused. I've spent a lot of my adult life trying to see past the next bend, mapping the road before I walk it. And I sat next to you on a train because I was tired and I hadn't mapped that particular decision, and then she gestured vaguely at the rooftop at him, at the accumulated fact of the past 4 months. Here we are at the bend. He was watching her. I don't need you to have it managed, she said. I'm not managed either. I pretend I am, but... She looked at him directly, with the straightforwardness that was her baseline mode in all things. I've been trying to decide what to do about you for about 6 weeks. And I still don't entirely know. She held his gaze. But I know that you learned Chui phrases and didn't tell me until they came out naturally. And I know that there's tea in a flask on this table because you read a text message and understood what it meant. And I know that you're the only person I've met in 2 years in this city who... She stopped. Looked for the right word. Matches. Something in how we match. In a way I didn't plan for. He was very still. Nun chi, she said softly. The word he had taught her. Reading what isn't said. Something shifted in his face. The careful expression opening slightly, like a door that had been held nearly closed finally released. Grace, he said. Just her name. The way he had said it from the beginning, with weight in it, like it meant more than names usually meant. Don't make it serious yet, she said. We have time. Let's just... She looked at the river. Walk the road a bit. He was quiet for a moment. Then, from somewhere she had not fully expected, Can I ask you something? The day name, he said. Abina. She looked at him. You told me your grandmother calls you that. He held her gaze. Can I? The thing about Grace Mensa was that she had criteria. Things had to be earned. The jollof rice supervision, the cultural honesty, the Chui phrases practiced in private and deployed naturally. She had been building a case file without announcing she was building one, and she knew the weight of what he was asking. Not just the name, the access behind it, the particular closeness it represented. She looked at him for a long moment on this rooftop in this city, for months from a train seat nobody had wanted. Yeah, she said, quietly. You can. He said it once, carefully, getting the syllables right because of course he had been practicing it, because of course he had Abina, like it was something to be handled correctly. She looked at the river so he wouldn't see her face do what it was doing. That's a lot, she said. Yes. We're going to take it slow. I know. I have criteria. I assumed. And you're going to have to keep sitting at Mr. Beck's cart and eating tteokbokki at a folding ledge like a normal person because that's not changing. I would not change the cart. Good. She exhaled. Looked at the city. Felt the particular, extraordinary, ordinary quality of a moment that would be a before and after point when she looked back at it. Also, I'm going to post about this on Instagram. He stared at her. No, not about you specifically. About the general concept of unexpected things. Grace. Abina, she corrected. testing how it sounded when she said it about herself, which was a new thing. He paused. Fine, he said. Post the concept. Thank you. She picked up her tea. The rice lesson is still scheduled for Saturday. You're going to pay attention this time. I paid attention last time. You paid attention and then made independent decisions, which is different. She looked at him with the expression he had learned was affection wearing the costume of sternness, which was maybe the most Grace Mensa thing about her. Saturday. Medium heat. No improvising. Saturday, he agreed. She nodded. Looked at the river one more time. The long view, soul doing its restless brilliant thing in every direction. For months ago she had been too tired for fear. She was still tired, often. She had decided this was fine. Some of the best things she had gotten because she sat down when everyone else was standing. She was choosing, today at this bend in the road, to sit down again. 6 weeks later, Bora pulled Grace aside in the break room and said, with the directness of a person who had been waiting for an update, the Instagram story, the one about unexpected things, that was about someone. Grace got a coffee pod from the machine. It was about a concept. It got 40,000 views, Grace. You captioned it, sometimes the seat everyone is avoiding is exactly where you need to be. That is about someone. People interpreted it many ways. I interpreted it as you being in your feelings. Bora leaned on the counter. Is it the person you had dinner with at the Sichuan place? Juno's friends saw you there. They said the man you were with was... She lowered her voice with the gravity of someone delivering significant information. Very well dressed. Lots of people in Seoul are well dressed. And that you two were there for almost 3 hours and the staff didn't rush you once. Which apparently does not happen at that restaurant unless... Bora. Just tell me if he's nice to you. Grace made her coffee, picked it up, turned around. He practiced a language for me, she said. So he could meet me somewhere I came from, and he brought tea to a rooftop. Because he understood what I needed before I said it. She paused. He's nice to me. Bora's expression went soft in the way of someone hearing what they'd hoped to hear. Okay, she said. That's enough. That's all you're getting. That's enough, Bora repeated contentedly. On a Saturday morning, Han Seo-jun stood in Grace Mensa's kitchen with an apron she had produced from a drawer with the energy of someone who had planned this and turned the heat to medium with the specific focus of a man who had been corrected once and had no intention of providing the same opportunity twice. She stood behind him, arms crossed, supervising. Stir it, she said. Not fast. Medium. I know. You said you knew last time. I know more this time. She looked at the side of his face. He was watching the pot with the precise attention he brought to things that mattered, which was, she had learned, everything he decided to do. Nothing halfway. Nothing managed from a distance. Medium heat, she confirmed. Medium heat, he said. The rice this time smelled correct. The apartment smelled like palm oil and tomatoes and the specific alchemy of a dish that had decided to cooperate. Outside the window, Seoul did its Saturday thing. Slower, warmer, the city taking a breath. Met us, she said. He looked at her. For what? For being teachable. She came to stand beside him and look in the pot. It's not nothing. He looked at her, close now in the small kitchen. The steam from the pot between them. This ordinary, extraordinary Saturday with its medium heat and its correct timing and everything the past months had built to this. And he said quietly, in Chui that was not perfect but was real. Mi duwa. She looked at him. He held it. She had taught him that one. Weeks ago. Casually, in a list of phrases. She hadn't thought he was taking notes for deployment. She should have known. She always should have known. Seo-jun, she said. The rice is going to burn.
Hey besties, in this story we learned that sometimes the best things in life come from the smallest, most unplanned decisions. When you stop overthinking and choose what feels right in the moment, you open the door to experiences that fear would have kept you away from. One brave, simple choice can quietly change your entire life path. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe, and share.